Welcome back, everyone. Thomas StJohn there on the left side of the screen with Ichiro Suzuki, who came through Korea as part of a tour. Thomas was a former journalist who has covered baseball and been a fan of the KBO for a long time, and he's kind enough to join us now. A former KBO writer, current professor. We'll get into the current in a moment. Let's get into the history here. When you went over to Korea, why you went over there, and how you became a journalist covering baseball, your history with the sport. What is that all about?
Okay, well, the big story starts about 28 years ago. I came to Korea, just was going to be an exchange student and was going to go back. And at the time, Korea was nothing like it is today. And the only thing that we got attracted to baseball very quickly. And uh, just been trying to do whatever I could in baseball for as long as I can.
So when you got attracted to the game, when was your first experience once you were in Korea going to a KBO game, and what was it like?
Wow. That was probably in about 1993 or so. And I have to say, I fell in love, and baseball is one of the big things that has kept me in Korea. That it was a lot more lively than what you would see at an MLB stadium, for example. And um, part of the thing is my first day at the baseball stadium, the previous LG Twins marketing manager invited me out to a game. So for my first baseball game, I had good seats, and then I went out to dinner with him and a couple of the players. And he made the mistake of asking me if I ever wanted to see another game to let him know. Well, I made sure to let him know, and the rest is history.
So you grew up where, and your baseball fandom in this country is who? Who do you root for, or do you not?
Oh, I do. I grew up in St. Louis, and basically 1 year before I graduated from college, I came to Korea. So I've been following the Cardinals here and there. And since I've been in Korea, I've been a very big fan of LG's big rival team, the Doosan Bears. So I don't know if Sangyu is going to be happy to hear that or not, but we both live in Seoul. There's two teams, but he's a better singer than I am, so I'll give him that.
Forget about the runner. Forget about the runner and keep the ball down. That's going to live for a long time. I'm telling you right now. Have you? There's so many fans that are like Q out there, but again, the passion that you've seen from the Korean fans while you were covering the game, do you have any particular stories, one that stands out throughout the years?
There was one that I do remember. Koreans in general are very passionate people, whether it's about their business, their family, but the ones who are passionate about baseball, they're overly passionate, and I mean that in a good way. And the fans between some of the rival teams really get into baseball. And there have been times where I'm going back 20 years, but trash cans would be thrown on the field. People would be climbing the outfield light posts and everything. The things tended to get a little bit interesting. That was after a few bottles of soju. It was a little bit different back then. You could get away with a few things that you couldn't get away with now.
Ball towards the corner, and it'll get down. We have two outs. When we get the third out, we'll take a break, Thomas, and bring you back. So how did you get into journalism? Like, how did you go from exchange student to guy covering baseball? I get that you liked it, but still you had to apply for a job and get a job.
I basically went begging because I realized that my best opportunity to kind of get into baseball was going to be the journalism route. And once I went to one of the newspapers, and this just happened to be where I met Jiho. Jiho was an intern at the same time that I was there. And I basically said, look, I'll work for free. Just let me put some of my articles in the newspaper. And they said, okay, don't worry, we'll pay you. And it was supposed to be once a week, and it ended up being as many as I can do. And once I got that, then I got my golden ID card, which got me into any stadium in the country for free.
Mm.
Wow. So when you're given the golden ID card, that's like Willy Wonka. You unwrap the chocolate bar and you get the gold key and you're getting inside the factory.
That is correct. And while I'm inside the factory, I'm going to take a lot of stuff. And from there, I wanted this to. I was hoping to get a career in baseball. I might have gone professional if I had any more skill, but I realized that my future was going to be behind a computer or behind a camera, and this was the way to do it. I never expected to be here for 28 years, but that's just kind of what happened. And then I got into baseball, and that's basically what I was married to. I was at the stadium basically every day. I would arrive 2 to 3 hours early just to kind of take in the ambiance of the stadium, to smell the pine tar and everything.
Sure.
I couldn't get enough.
Ball sent into center field, and the Twins are going to have a runner at third base. That was a pinch runner who came in after a walk, and now again 90 feet away from scoring the seventh run. So it's interesting. You grow up in St. Louis, you understand the relationship that fans have with the Cardinals, how they are reported on and covered. One of the great radio stations whose signal went from East Coast to West Coast, and it was, it helped grow the Cardinal brand. What's the difference in terms of covering a team in Korea versus what you got used to reading about and seeing here in this country?
At the time I came here, the only reporting that was being done in Korean. I was the first person who covered the KBO in English, and I knew that the KBO had something. It was not MLB, but it was its own brand of baseball, if you want to say. The stadium experience was a lot different, and I wanted to kind of share that with the foreigners who were in Korea, because in the pre-internet times, which was kind of when I started, the newspaper was the only way to go. So I needed to get that column in order to share the baseball experience with the people who were there.
So let me ask you, Eddie, just let me follow up. So when you're writing English columns for, as you said, the foreigners that are over there, like, what is your audience? Do you know, at that point, how big is it? Who are you appealing to besides foreigners? Like, how many people are actually interested in reading English accounts of Korean baseball in Korea?
There was probably the biggest audience would have been the U.S. military, who was stationed here, because a lot of them were getting, that they were on base most of the time. And, the baseball was one thing that Korea had that was very similar. So we would get a lot of U.S. military personnel would go to the games. Then you had the English teacher groups that were here. Other than that, the newspaper didn't know who their demographic was exactly. But those were the two groups of people who I saw at the stadium the most.
Okay.
So for how many years were you pretty much the only English writer covering the KBO?
I was the only one doing it for about 10 or 11 years. And that started in about 1993 or 4, and then it went on for about 10 years after that. And then someone like Jiho moved up in the world, and then he started doing that. And then Dan Kurtz, who runs mykbo.net, was he had started that, and then I got to kind of know Dan, and I've met him a couple of times here, and it was just really good that when I kind of stopped, someone else was there to kind of keep the torch going, so to speak.
All right, so you got an English guy from St. Louis over in Korea who has broken into the ranks of being a journalist. What was the dynamic when I assume you're not just chronicling the game in your own opinion, you have to interview guys. How did you go about talking to Korean ball players to make this work?
That was actually one of my biggest things, because I never thought I was going to be here, and I didn't put in as much time as I should have on the language. So I had a girl that I met, and her English was really good. And I said, look, I know you're a baseball fan. I'll let you meet the players, but you got to work for free. So she did.
She did. All right. So we'll use the barter system there. It worked. We'll talk more about that as we continue here. The KBO on ESPN. Resourceful. KBO on ESPN. It is the Wyverns and the KT Wiz. That's tomorrow, 5:30 first pitch. Coverage at 5:25. The Doosan Bears, our professor's favorite team, against the LG Twins, Friday, 5:25 a.m. Eastern Time. Thomas St. John joins us again, continuing our conversation with the man that went over there 28 years ago as an exchange student, hasn't come back. I'm sure you visited, but you haven't come back to live. You've stayed over there, and we've learned about his history as a journalist. When you decided to leave journalism, I'm wondering why you left, but before we get there, I think a lot of people are like, well, wait a minute. You learn the language by having a female friend who you promised could meet players as a way to help you understand the language. So how did that whole thing work out?
Well, I didn't put the time in that I needed at that time to learn Korean, and she was perfectly bilingual. So she got to meet the players, and she worked for free, and I would ask the question, and then she would be translating to the player. And then I was able to do some interviews with the players that I would not have been able to do by myself.
How long would you then say it took you to learn the language? Are you now bilingual?
I can understand pretty well. I would not say I'm bilingual yet, but I can understand many things. And at that time, I was able to do kind of simple interviews in Korean. So eventually I was able to study more, and then I was able to kind of be by myself more.
Okay. So we're a journalist. That lasts for how long? Did you win awards? Did you cover all the series that while you were over there? Like, what's the pinnacle of the journalism career?
I think the pinnacle of the journalism career was kind of, I'll say it's two parts. The first one was that I did it, that I was the first one to do it, and then now we're on ESPN. And the second one was just the compliments that the players gave me, that, that someone was, that someone from outside of Korea cared about the league or cared about them enough to interview them. So that's kind of the big thing that I would say is my biggest accolade.
Okay.
So many years of journalism there, as you told us, and then all of a sudden you're like, okay, I'm going to hang them up and I'm going to become a professor. How did you end up going from one to the other?
There were some creative differences, I guess we could say, and the golden ticket suddenly disappeared. And at that time, I needed I needed a job. So I applied for a job at the university where I am right now, and I haven't left. I love it.
That's great. You seem to be sort of on the cusp when you realize, look, foreigners may find this really appealing. And you mentioned now that it's on ESPN. What has this been like for you to see the game you really fell in love with exposed the way it has been?
I'm really happy. I wish it didn't quite take this long to do, but it's the game here in Korea has so much to offer that even like when I take people who are not baseball fans to a game here in Korea, they usually say it's kind of one of the big highlights of their trip. It's just the whole experience is very unique. When you put, 25 or 30,000 people in a stadium here in Korea, it really kind of it's just a party atmosphere, and it goes 9 innings and it doesn't stop. And the beers are only about $3 or $4 for a big bottle, so it's very affordable to do.
There's a thread that every fan seems to walk on, which is this beer thing.
Well, they actually have something here. It's called chimak. The chi is chicken. The mak is makju or beer. And pretty much every single person who goes to the game will have chicken and beer. I mean, that's kind of like having a Dodger dog or something like that. So, yeah, beer is enjoyed quite a lot here.
I think it's the word that's been used the most so far in this game besides keep the ball down. It's beer. It's
You're not gonna
it's a
make me sing,
common
are you?
it's a common thread.
Yeah.
Thomas, or better said, Professor St. John, what do you teach at the university, and how easy or difficult has it been for you to and rewarding for you to do what you do? As there are two outs and
First,
about to be three.
ooh,
Take a time out, Thomas. We'll get right back to that answer as we continue. Just take a quick, 1 minute timeout. We'll continue this conversation with the KBO on ESPN after this. Welcome back, everyone. Professor Thomas St. John, who was once a KBO writer and now a professor. Eduardo was asking before we went to the break, what is it that you teach at university?
right now I teach writing, presentation. I teach a course on entrepreneurship, but I have to say my favorite class that I teach is I teach Korean university students about Korean baseball history.
Really?
You can believe that. Yeah. I've been
Sure.
doing that
Wow.
I've been doing that for about 6 or 7 years. And one thing I noticed is many of the players, like the Babe Ruths of the KBO, many students who are in their 20s are not very familiar with them. And I kind of noticed that there was a missing piece. So if you're a fan of LG Twins, for example, like Sangyu, I think it's important that you know the history of your team. And that's kind of what we talk about.
What is the relationship? Because it sounds like this is such an event. I mean, when we do Little League World Series, we've had everybody that's basically been a baseball analyst come to Williamsport. Terry Francona said it's sort of a mixing of baseball and county fair. Everybody paints this picture of KBO baseball as an event. It's not a game. It's bigger than that. It's an event. It would strike me that while beer and chicken are important, so is grooming the next generation of fan, and yet you're teaching a course to give the history, which sounds like American history, but it's focused on baseball. In this country, you learn all about the past. You learn about war. You learn about invention. You learn about depression. You learn about money and things like that. What kind of background do the students come to your class with? Is it advanced? Is it rudimentary? What is it?
It's kind of a mix of people. The majority of them don't really know a lot about it because it's not very popular. Just for example, if you're a Yankees fan in America, you know about all the Yankees greats. In Korea, it was kind of done a little bit. It was done differently. They didn't really teach about the history of it. And in my little corner of the world, I wanted to try to make a difference. So each student will do a presentation about one of the legendary players. And then at the end of the semester, we go to the stadium. I arrange to have a tour. Maybe they can meet some players, walk through the dugout, take a picture on the field, and get a good experience about that.
What's the breakdown of your course, male, female?
Half.
Good.
Carl, this is pretty much something that Timmy K could probably be doing here. History of Major League Baseball players, right? In a college course.
Absolutely.
How great would that be?
Absolutely. Do your fellow professors look at you and say, "You're stealing money, man. You've created something. You're just stealing money"?
Well, you know what? If someone else wanted to do it, there's plenty of room, but no one was doing it. And even at the time when I started, the KBO itself really was not doing it. So for my 15 students every semester, by the time they leave, they know who at least 15 of
100%.
the major players were. Especially for your favorite team in Korea, you have to know some of this. That at least that's what I thought going into making the class. And another thing is the people we study, many of them I've met and I've interviewed. So
you have guest speakers. They must come into the class and speak. I mean, have we tapped into that?
yes. Yeah, I've had some MLB scouts come into my class. I've had some former players that I knew from way back in the day come into the class. And for them, it's just so perfect. They usually don't get a chance to meet anybody. So, through this class, I want to kind of give them that good experience.
Well, you've given us a great experience. It's a really neat thing. We can see your passion for the sport and how it has led to 2 careers. Thomas, thanks so much for joining us here. We really appreciate it. Best of luck to you, and we continue to carry the KBO on ESPN.
Thanks, guys. Rock and roll.